Part of the Neighbors Building Neighborhoods Academy. And today, as you come in to the course, we ask you if you could mute yourself so there's no background noise, because we will be recording the session. So if you guys could do that for us, if not, you will be muted. There will be 2 times for questions and answers, and we ask that you put those in the chat box, or if we're in the question and answers period, you can also raise your hand via the application. So today, for the Neighborhood Standards course, we're going to do a welcome and a video. We're going to tell you who's going to be speaking tonight and on what subjects. So part 1 is going to be My Norfolk and Codes Enforcement. And for My Norfolk, we have Halima Carr here, who is the Customer Services Manager for the Norfolk Care Center. And for Neighborhood Quality, we have Sherry Johnson, who is the Division Head for Neighborhood Quality. And then in part 2 for Neighborhood Standards and Curb Appeal, Delk Kuhlman, Neighborhood Development Specialist, and myself, Jamie Golden, also a Neighborhood Development Specialist, will be taking on that part of the course. And then we will have evaluations. So we are looking forward to everybody's input. We also want to know what you guys want to learn from tonight. So if you can put yourself off mute and introduce yourself and what you want to learn tonight from the course, that way we can focus on some of that, that would be wonderful. Do you have any takers for introductions? Debbie, forehand, you're the first one I see. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure, I was just getting ready to unmute myself. Hi, I'm Debbie Forehand with River Forest Shores Wayside Manor Easton Place Civic League. And I just want to learn more about code enforcement and what we need to do as leaders to try to get our communities to abide by the codes.
Yes.
Great.
I didn't see you come up.
Charlene, did you want to introduce yourself?
In a minute.
Okay.
I'll go. Hi, I'm Wendy Hazel. I'm with Highland Park Civic League. And I'm a lifelong learner and I always want to learn more. We are very, we like to use My Norfolk, and I want to know how best to use My Norfolk and how we can teach the other residents to use it as well, because it is an excellent tool.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy. All right, Barbara, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, Barb Wilson from Roseville Area Civic League. And the question that I actually wrote down was, how can residents and or civic leagues help with code enforcement?
Okay, I think if there's others that would like to introduce themselves, if they could put it in the chat box, and if they have any questions or things that they want to learn tonight, so we can go ahead and get started on our course. And if you guys can just remute yourselves, that would be wonderful. And we're going to start off with a little video.
Jamie, I can't, I don't hear anything. Yeah, I'm not sure
Yeah,
about sound.
I think we're having some issues with the sound and a little bit of a lag on the video, unfortunately.
Oh, thank goodness. I thought I was going deaf.
No, we were just trying to see what we could do to figure it out, but I think it's just Yeah, I'm not sure we're gonna have any luck with the video here tonight, Jamie.
Oh, when you did the share screen, when you hit the share button at the bottom, did you optimize for video and motion?
Oh, sorry, Halima, if you can start your presentation, that would be wonderful.
Okay, all right, great. Good evening, everybody. My name is Halima Carr. I'm the Customer Service Manager for the Norfolk Care Center in the Department of Neighborhood Development. Just a little bit of background on me. June 27th, I would have been with the city for 16 years in almost every city department. I won't even name them because then you'll say, how does that go together? Anyway, so the Norfolk Care Center is the single point of contact for visitors, residents, and businesses to request a city service, to report a concern, or seek information about the city of Norfolk, or to follow up on a previous request. You can submit city service requests by submitting a request via the web portal at www.mynorfolk.org. By submitting a service request utilizing the My Norfolk mobile app. You just type My Norfolk in the Google Play or the Apple App Store. You can also submit a service request via social media on Facebook and Twitter. You can also email us at healthyneighborhoods@norfolk.gov. For the deaf and hearing impaired, you can dial #711 and ask the operator for Norfolk Care's Assistance Center. And then lastly, you can call us at 757-664-6510. We are open Monday through Friday, 8 o'clock a.m. to 4 o'clock p.m. Next slide. So just a little, I just wanted to give a little bit of background. So the COVID-19 pandemic began, as far as for Norfolk, specifically Norfolk Cares, March 13th, 2020, and it has affected so much, not only for code compliance, but just an overall way that we handle city services. And I always try to put it in perspective for residents. It has created a large shift across the country for the pure volume of contact to municipal contact centers, and also across the country, the way that we conduct city operations as a whole. So one of the things that I did want to speak on is, as a result of the pandemic, you might have noticed timeline shifts as far as city services, the way that things were previously handled. For example, you might have been used to going into the DMV Select, perhaps, in City Hall and just getting, quick services done, whereas now you would have to schedule an appointment and answer COVID screening questions to come in. So there's so many different variances of that are going on since the pandemic, and that has changed the way that we operate business within the Norfolk Care Center. Next slide. Okay, so I just wanted to share the top 5 service requests that we had before the pandemic were bulky item pickup requests, collection complaints, debris at curb, tall weeds and grass on private property, and trash and debris on private property. The top 5 service requests that have affected us since COVID-19, and this still continues on, and we're about 1 year, a 1-year anniversary since the pandemic. The number 1 request is bulky item pickup requests. Debris at curb would be second, followed by abandoned vehicle on street, then tall weeds and grass on private property, and parking violations. And just to speak to, I would say that bulky item pickup requests for Norfolk will always be our number 1 request. From what I've seen, I've been managing the Norfolk Care Center since 2011, and that's always been the number 1 request, be it hurricane, snowstorm, pandemic, bulky item pickup is number 1. I do believe with more people being at home, you have children who are doing remote learning, there's more opportunity for debris. There's more time on your hands, especially when the pandemic first hit and we had more time at home and there were social distancing guidelines. That leads to it. As far as debris at curb, I believe that on a national level since the pandemic, there is more litter with more people being at home, things of that nature. As far as abandoned vehicle on the street, we did see an uptick in this when DMV appointments were delayed. So if you're having, for myself, I tried to make a DMV appointment in October. My appointment was not October of 2020. My appointment was not available until May of 2021, and that was for renewing my registration. As a result of that, you might see some vehicles with expired license plate, with expired inspections and things like that as a result of the pandemic, and that's when we saw an increase in service requests. As a result of tall weeds and grass on private property and parking violations, I'll say when we have a pandemic, some things filter down. For example, if there's with the pandemic, there were a lot of people who were unemployed, and unfortunately, they might not have had the opportunity to cut their grass, or they might not have had an opportunity to, park correctly, or maybe they have a mass parking ticket, just a number of things, and that results in an increase in the volume of calls that we have. Next slide. And so I just wanted to give some helpful tips, because even though the pandemic is 1 year in, and as we noticed, social distancing guidelines easing, as the governor stated, I believe, beginning May 15th, and we noticed that more people are being vaccinated and things like that. Requests for bulk waste pickups will always be limited to 400 pickups per day throughout the city. That is not going to change at this time. So when we reach that threshold, a notification will be sent out if you use My Norfolk, or if you call in informing you that we have to schedule you for the next available collection day. Something to keep in mind is even though the pandemic is 1 year in and social distancing guidelines are lifting, the waste management operators still have to follow safety procedures for their safety. And so that is a reason why there's an operational threshold of 400 per day. The next helpful tip is our call volume has increased. Our hold time has increased. We offer you the opportunity to download the My Norfolk app by, like I said, going to the Google Play or the Apple App Store, or visiting www.mynorfolk.org. That's my son. Sorry, he's here. By going to www.mynorfolk.org, or you can also, email us at healthyneighborhoods@norfolk.gov with your service request. I will say, as far as the whole time, what we're finding is the complexity of the questions take a little bit longer. For someone, like I mentioned about DMV Select, they may ask, well, I never had to do that before, so I don't know, how do I do that? I never had to schedule an appointment to go to City Hall. I don't know how this works. And so because of that, it's taking longer to answer the questions, and it, increases our hold time. The next helpful tip is that typical completion timeframes are not the same in light of the current pandemic and in light of safety precautions. So city employees do have to take safety precautions for themselves. For example, you wouldn't see 10 or 12 city employees in one van because of social distancing guidelines. So if they're all traveling to a project, it's going to take a little bit longer to make sure that we follow safety precautions. The next thing is I still want to make sure to highlight, while the weekly jobless claims have greatly decreased since the beginning of the pandemic, unemployment is still at an all-time high. And so just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as far as neighbors who may have difficulties in maintaining their neighborhood standards and completing the routine maintenance that they normally might have. It's not an excuse. It's just we ask that you have an understanding of that when we explain the process to you. And then the last thing is that the city of Norfolk at the beginning of the pandemic did cut down on its staffing and service delivery, which included the furloughs of 550 part-time city employees and contractual staff. So I just wanted to make sure to point that out to you. One thing I did want to say is I remember at the beginning of the presentation, there was a discussion of how best to use the My Norfolk app or the web portal. I think the best thing to do for residents is to have a registered account. Registered accounts allow you to receive notifications about the life of your service request. With the mobile app, if you have the mobile app and have a registered account, you're going to get those push notifications whenever there's an issue that affects city service. And so the best thing to do is to have a registered My Norfolk account, or you can have, if you have a registered mynorfolk.org account, that same information can be used on the mobile app. So I just wanted to share that information, and then I will pass it off to my esteemed colleague, Ms. Sherry Johnson, with the Division of Neighborhood Quality and Code Compliance.
Okay, I guess that's me. Thank you. So I see some familiar names and some familiar faces. So welcome back. If you've heard some of my spiels before, I may be repeating myself, but there's always something new that we talk about. And this presentation is a little different if you've heard me before, because we're talking more about neighborhood standards than we are like codes and delving into what is a code or what isn't a code. That's not to say we won't answer those questions, or you can't call me or text me or put it in the chat, and I won't, but I'm going to talk about the difference between the two. So neighborhood quality is the division housed in neighborhood development for the city of Norfolk. And we have a mission statement, it's there, and I'm sure all of you guys can read it, but basically we're there to assist that neighborhoods meet minimum requirements for codes for health and safety in our city. And the codes that we enforce are both state and local, so some of them will be just specific to our city. We are unique in the fact that most cities, if they have a property maintenance code or even a division like ours, is not housed where we are. They're usually housed under the planning department or under the building commissioner, and kind of lumped in with all the people that are doing rehabs and getting permits and new builds. And I think that gives us a very different light and a very different way to come at neighborhood problems, because you'll hear me say, as I've always said, housing and codes is really not about housing, it's about people. So with that said, we are a division that is also in the department that has the Norfolk Cares Assistance Center, which helps with filtering in with the citizens, that has the pulse on what's going on in the community, and all of those resources out there that help us find out what's going on in the nooks and crannies of your neighborhood. You're our eyes and ears too, as well as what it is that you really want in your neighborhood. We also have the Renovate Norfolk program, where people, I cite a house because they need repairs, they can apply for money, and we'll talk about how that's different for COVID. That we have these wraparound services like Rent Ready. That one of the things, my goal in life is to just educate all the renters out there so that they're not taking poor housing or have to take poor housing, that they know their rights and responsibilities. So with that said, our placement as codes, and that's kind of like this cold word, is in this very warm department. So that's a little bit about what I want to talk about, is the difference between that cold code of You have to just do it because I said you did, because it's a city ordinance. And what is your neighborhood standard? What is your neighborhood? What is it that have the peer pressure in your neighborhood? What are you going to tolerate? I don't know what my next slide is. Let's go. Thanks. So this was just a little bit, I always found this very fascinating, that codes have been around since the beginning of time. Now they were, and you can see, a little bit stricter than we are in the Division of Neighborhood Quality, because we haven't put anybody to death recently, or tortured them, or taken their son or daughter, because I don't need anybody's son or daughter. But if a builder builds a house for someone and does not construct it properly, and the house which he built falls in and kills the owner, then the builder shall be put to death. Pretty stringent. We're not going quite there, but we'll talk about what tools we have. The point of it is, though, codes have been around for a very long time, and most of the codes, I will not say all of them, there is a reason it's there. There is some kind of something that happened, why you have hurricane straps when you have to build, why you have earthquake building when you live on the West Coast, why we have hurricanes, why we really don't want you to park on the grass, and why you have to paint your house. There really is a logical reason behind most of the codes that we have and that we enforce. So really, necessity is the mother of invention. And I want to talk a little bit about the COVID, even though it's been a year, like Halima said, I can't believe it, that we have changed the way that we do some of our code enforcement because of that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. Go ahead. So I mentioned earlier, we have two codes that we are responsible for. So the first is the Purple Book. It's the Virginia Maintenance Code. It is adopted from the International CCC, International Code Council. So Virginia says we are going to adopt this portion of the code, but we're going to change some things in it. They take out the administrative section, put this in. And so basically it's the international code with Virginia's kind of brush stroke on it. And that is all housing, all structures. So every structure in the city of Norfolk, so that includes houses, sheds, garage, commercial, and residential. Everything that's already built falls under the property maintenance code. Book looks pretty cool. It's not that thick. It's not rocket science. It's very straightforward. Basically, you have to maintain your house in a way that it was when it was built. So I can't come in and tell you that you have to put in all of these new, green things in your house, and you've got to have this hot water heater or that when you're fixing it. It only needs to be for when your house was built. So a good example of that is we get a lot of college kids, and they move into older homes down in Gat and Colonial Place, and they're like, I'm popping fuses all the time, and I don't have a ground on this electrical outlet. Well, your house wasn't built for that back in the day, and I can't make them bring it up to code and replace the whole electrical system in the house so that you can run your laptop, your PS, your 5 TVs, and everything else in your house that we do today. So it's just the difference. I can't make you bring it up to today's codes. So anyway, that's the Purple Book. That has to do with all of the structures, and it is a state code, and we can prosecute, criminally for state codes. It's an unspecified misdemeanor and carries up to $1,200 fine and 12 months in jail. I've never put anybody in jail for painting their house or anything like that, but it does carry criminal penalties. And so all of our inspection staff are special police commissions, and we can actually handwrite a summons to somebody for various city ordinances and all of our housing ordinances. The only thing with this that we've had to deal with, and I think we've done very well, is interior inspection. So 99.9% of the time, that's tenants calling in that there's something going on in their house and they're having an issue with their landlord. Starting May 1st, we will go back to doing interior inspections as long as precautions are taken, and we have a waiver signed off from that tenant that's letting us in, that they understand we have a mask, they have a mask, we're all masked. But up until now, we've just really been handling them with calling landlords and stuff, and have been pretty successful. Good. So these are just some of the examples of the structures. We do a lot of coordination with the fire marshal's office. You can see the difference. Hoarding, I think it's always been there. It's just most of the time those situations come to light, even though it's not so much the house, but what you can see is when you hoard, it's a breakdown of systems in your house, your plumbing, your fire load. You get a lot of rot, you get a lot of rodents, you get a lot of sanitation issues for hoarding. And then the other one's just, your regular exterior, got some siding falling off. Those are just some of the houses that we deal with that's under the purple book. Jamie? These are usually the ones that you guys are most visible in your neighborhoods that we're dealing with. These are city ordinances, and we enforce some of the zoning ordinance that kind of coordinate with those. Zoning ordinance are absolutely specific to your zoning code in the city of Norfolk. And then our city ordinances are also only in the city of Norfolk, but it's the city telling me I can't do it, not the state. So the most prominent ones that we get when we talk about neighborhoods, and people say, oh, my neighborhood, it's hard, it's going, it looks horrible, it's this or that. It's usually these, it's trash, grass, and inoperable vehicles all day long is what we're looking about. And we usually consider those environmental type problems in the neighborhood. Junked vehicles seem to multiply. I don't know how they do that, but they do. And what we've seen a lot, and I can't say it's because of the pandemic or maybe we're just seeing it, is we have a lot of scrappers that we'll find where people, find backyards similar to this, but mostly metals where people are keeping them in their backyard to do some scrapping. So those are probably some of the items that you have questions about and want to talk about today. But what I'd like to talk about is the difference between what is a violation and what is a standard. I'm not sure what my next slide is though, Jamie. If you could, I should have had it up on my other screen. So this is where I like to say we have code enforcement with a heart, and I love a little common sense. Grass, it's grass season. I know y'all know, I know you can hear it. It is growing. Mine is growing right now. I hear it coming in the window. I don't know why, with the exception that we have people that just refuse to cut their grass. A grass violation is not a violation until the grass is 12 inches tall. That is 12 inches consistently. That's not sprouts over by the tree or sprouting the one sunny spot you got. It does not mean leaves. It does not mean twigs. It means 12 inches of grass is a violation. The reason is at that length, it can cause rodent harborages. We're talking about that. But what people will always tell me, oh, it's that tall. All the snakes and mice in Norfolk are going to come to this one field because the grass is that tall. And they can attract rodents and such. But it's not a violation 12 inches. Once it hits 12 inches, I can write a notice. My notice says you have 7 days to abate it. So now it's another 4 or 5 inches taller, depending on how much we get rain here. And you still don't cut it because maybe you're dead, you're out of town, it's an air property. It could be a million things, and this could be a vacant lot or a house. Then we have to put it out to bid for a city contractor to come. That's another 2 weeks. So from beginning to end, it could take at the very least, if all the stars and the moon came together, 21 days to get that 12 inches cut by a city contractor. I can do that, and we do it a lot. The city contractor cuts it. It's a really nice cut. We bill them. It is not a nice bill. There's an admin fee that goes to the property owner, regardless whether it's a tenant or a property owner. It always goes to the owner. If they don't pay it, it goes to a lien against their property. Now, with that said, what's your standard in your neighborhood? So you know as well as I do what streets you drive down, and everybody edges their yard. Edging a yard is not a violation, okay? So making sure that your grass doesn't eat the entire sidewalk is a violation, but just because it's hanging out there a little bit doesn't make it a violation. That's a neighborhood standard. That people have porches that they have painted, that they have flowers in their flower bed, that they have flower beds. I get a lot of overgrown flower beds this time of year, or people that have overgrown gardens. That is not a tall weeds and grass violation. That's a neatness violation. Do you want mulch in your flower bed, or do you want pine straw? Those are neighborhood standards. That's the difference between the two. And I think Delk and Jamie have some really good resources to help neighborhoods decide on kind of where they're at and what are reasonable things for your neighborhood, because not every neighborhood is going to be the same. And so the other item that I wanted to talk about too is parking and inoperable vehicles. I get a lot of people that are parking on the grass. Well, parking on the grass is a deceiving way to say it, because it's only parking on the unimproved surface of your front yard, which is the first 25 foot of your buildable lot. So just because you have cars parked on the side of your house or in the rear of your house, they're not really a violation. Now you could park 15 cars in your rear yard as long as they ran and had an inspection and plates. You could have 15 of them back there. That is not a violation. Is that a neighborhood standard? Probably. Same thing with boats. Same things with storing stuff. Kind of, it's a little bit sacred code-wise for in the backyard. Also, keep in mind that our inspectors, we have a Fourth Amendment, a search and seizure. If we can't see it from the right-of-way, we can't write it. So if it's something you can see from your yard, you're going to need to let us know so that we can, come into your yard and see what it is that we're seeing. Now, that's not to say you can have 15 junked vehicles in your backyard. Those are rat harborages, and we can write them, but we have to be able to see them. One of the things that I did want to say, and I wrote down, I want to know more about code enforcement, were the things that I heard when we introduced ourselves. What can I do in my civic league do to help code enforcement? How can I use my Norfolk better? One of the things about code enforcement is the word codes in itself. I get a lot of people or civic leagues that believe that if you got all the code enforcement, if you got all the grass, if you got all the cars gone, it would be good and we would be better and everything would be right. Doesn't necessarily work that way, because what it is there's behavior issues behind the reason that some of the streets are the way that they are. There's, people don't know. Some of it is education. That's a definite resource for you. They don't know what they can and can't do. Again, I bring up my ex-husband, whatever, all the time. It's from the country. They kept every car they ever owned in the entire family because you always need a spare part. That's not something we do here in the city of Norfolk. And then the word code, again, is used very, very broadly by citizens and civic leagues. And some of the codes that are enforceable, that are the biggest, are multi-department. And so the use of My Norfolk is so very helpful when the civic leagues and citizens understand what they're calling in, so that it goes to that direct department. So bulky items, like Halima said, is for whatever reason, one of the biggest things that we get out on the wrong day. They stay out, they're put out wrong, you can't get them, then they get dumped on. That all goes to waste management for them to handle. So the quicker we can get it to the right department, the better. So that's why I think My Norfolk has been so successful, is because it's great and it shoots it right near it where it needs to be. I see some stuff in the chat. Y'all want me to stop and see what I got here?
I think this is a perfect time. Yeah, to go into the Q&A. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, let me do that. So oversized vehicles, boats and RVs and work trucks in the driveway or in front of the house. So that's a good one. With that said, the current ordinance involves residential area. So don't worry about anything commercial, but if you live in a residential area, commercial vehicles are not allowed to be there unless they're doing work. Makes sense. Means you can't bring your 18-wheeler home or, have 42,000, plumbing trucks in your driveway. But with that said, the definition of a commercial vehicle is very long and drawn out, and there's lots of exceptions that can be done for them. There's also a difference whether it's on the street during the day or in the yard at night. There's a exception for one taxi cab has to be in your driveway, a 30-seat passenger bus you can have there in your driveway, or the whole bus can be there on the street or in your yard during certain hours during the day. It's not a commercial vehicle just because it has ladders on it or it has a sign that says it's commercial. It has to meet a gross vehicle weight and definition to be a vehicle. And with that said, I'm going to get into the RVs, which are recreational vehicles. With the pandemic, one of the things that we've really been more conscious of is, and you can have one panel van that's an exception overnight, but what I've seen complaints on are people bringing home like HVAC, electrical, it's their work vans because they're working from home or they're getting called out or those kinds of issues. So if somebody has that or tow truck that's not blocking the street, it's not horrendous, we have not really been writing them once we touch base with the property owner and we try to do that, what's going on? Oh, well, blah, 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 because we're working from home now. I'm sorry. And I also want Michaels and Sons and whoever they are to come out in the middle of the night when my plumbing breaks. So I'd like for them to have their truck in the neighborhood. So with that said, boats and RVs are another animal. Additionally, I'm sorry, before I leave commercial vehicles, so everybody knows, trailers under definition in the code, no matter what size they are not defined, are considered commercial and residential areas. I want to go back to common sense now. A trailer that you're carrying, you're riding lawnmower around, or when you go camping, in my opinion, is not a commercial vehicle. We are working with the city attorney to change the language to give us better definitions of commercial vehicles. So hopefully by next year, we'll have that layered out better for us. RVs and boats. Boats, if they're under 6 foot tall on their trailer, can be parked in the side or rear yard. We treat RVs the same way. If you can get it beside your house, usually behind the front plane of your house, it's going to be okay to be parked there. Anywhere in the rear of your house, 5 foot off the property line. Barb, did that answer your question?
So, yes, I think so. So it has to be behind the front corner of the house. That's still the rule.
It is supposed to be, yes. And I will tell you, if you're sticking out a couple of feet, I'm not so inclined to write a ticket on that. Now, one of them big old $200,000 janks up in your driveway and that's a different story. We did go through several complaints where people had been evicted and were living in campers in friends' driveways that we tried to work with. But yeah, so is that clear, or we can talk offline too?
No, that's fine. We just have one boat that's sitting in a driveway in the neighborhood. It's not bothering anybody. I just wondered what the current rule was.
So yeah, that's it. This time of the year, you'll see a lot of those boats come in and out. It's, we usually weekends because you're taking your boat out, you're washing it, in your yard. Again, but it sits there for weeks and weeks on end. If it's in the street without being hooked to anything, that's fair game. We had a question, about a sign for the city to use for
Yes,
disability
I
or
was going to answer
wheelchairs.
that one.
Okay.
So just to, Ms. Christopher, I see that you live in Cruiser Place between Colonial Place and Riverview, and you had a question about a sign for the city to use for disability or wheelchair because you live across from a nursing home at Maryland and Alejandro. Many residents use wheelchairs and walk slowly. When there's a problem on Granby Street, drivers use Alejandro like the Indianapolis Speedway anyway to put signs with wheelchairs. I would say that's a kind of a multi-part question. As far as signage, there isn't a sign for wheelchairs specifically. There are a couple of things that could happen. If it's the Indianapolis Speedway, it sounds like there needs to be some type of traffic study. Just so we can, address the traffic issues, maybe, having the CROs do some surveillance. Perhaps we need to lower the speed limit in that area, things of that nature. Also, hopefully that area has ADA ramps. If not, definitely contact us. We can work with Public Works to get that installed. I know for signage, the Department of Transit, they're very strategic on signage to make sure we're not like doing signage on steroids for different things across the city. So I know, from maybe pedestrian crossing signs or things of that nature, those are some of the options that you have. Did that answer your question, sort of?
Kind of, sort of, but no.
Okay, how can I help
I
answer?
have been in Chesapeake, and I saw a sign with a wheelchair on it. And my concern has been some of the residents over at the nursing home move out. I mean, they travel backwards in their wheelchair going to 7-Eleven, because I'm in Omaha and Maryland, and I'm a block up from 38th Street. So they'll be going over to 7-Eleven or up to the McDonald's. And we did have one resident who was hit by a car. And it is just my concern that we could find some kind of way to slow the traffic down. And now that we have no parking on one side of Omaha, right there from Delaware to Delaware to Maryland, it really makes it a tight curve, and drivers come through there. And if there are issues on Granby Street, they will cut over to use Omaha to go down to 38th or 35th Street or whatever. And they generally flying, and we have been blessed thus far that I've only seen one accident with the residents, because some of the residents, they can't make them stay in the building so they can go out. And I was like, oh my God. But at any rate, and we're better with the curb cutouts, because I had an issue with trying to get my mother out of the nursing home. And so they came and did put cutouts all around. So that part is kind of taken care of. But I'm just real concerned when it gets hot. The residents don't want to stay in the cold nursing home, so they come
right
out.
So, great question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk with the Department of Transit about a wheelchair crossing sign, and then in the meantime, can create a service request to look at it. I hear a lot of a need for some type of traffic study or traffic calming, but just based off of what you were describing, for them to go ahead and look at that. So I can create a service request and then get with, I guess, Jim or Delk or Jamie for your contact information, just to follow up with you on that. But I will ask them, because you said in Chesapeake they had a wheelchair crossing sign. I know sometimes there are privately purchased signs, like those kids that play with the yellow little kid with the hat with the flag. That's not a city sign. That's something you can purchase from Home Depot. So I will ask them if we do have that, and then if we do, how that process works. Does that sound good?
Yeah, they'll probably recognize my name because this isn't the first time I put this request in. I actually went to my friend's house to take a picture of the sign and sent a picture to, the sign, but I thought I would take advantage of the opportunity since I had you in front of me to, put my request in again. But that sounds
Sure.
good, and I appreciate what you're saying. And and I look forward to how they answer you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. No problem.
Nikki just asked me to bring up the one last one, and then I'm going to move on. And then, I'm available. One of the things on this time of the year, and we're talking about the actual definition of the word verge when we write notices. So in the city of Norfolk, you're responsible between the sidewalk and the curb is the basic normal definition of a verge area to cut and maintain, as well as keeping the grass out of the sidewalk so it's passable. In addition to that, parking wise too, one of the things that we need to make sure for education wise, and I think for all the civic leagues, that you're responsible for the verge, but your driveway apron is your responsibility as well. And parking by a driveway apron is 3 foot on either side. So in those neighborhoods where you have really tight parking, that is a parking violation because you can't turn out into the driveway. There are other areas in the city, and if anybody has any of the weird ones that have paved and unpaved alleys and paper streets and little weird sections of grass, probably best if you talk to Halima and I on the side, and we can figure out the responsibilities for that, because sometimes you think it's just black and white and it's city property and it's not, and sometimes it's not. I'm going to move on because, I know code enforcement is very exciting. But everybody, I'm sure, has my email, or if not, you can send it out, Jamie, for this. And then always use my Norfolk. And then if you have questions specific to your civic league or your area, please do not hesitate to just email me.
Awesome. Thank you, Sherry and Halima. So yeah, that's all the time we have today for our Q&A, but great questions. So thank you guys for participating. And thank you again, Sherry and Halima. And yeah, afterwards, we'll certainly make sure we have contact information and resources shared back with all the participants so that everybody can stay connected and ask any other questions we weren't able to get to today. So we are going to move into the neighborhood standards section of our presentation and webinar here tonight. But before we do, I want to try to revisit the video from earlier. We're going to see if we fixed it. So we're just going to give us a shot real quick. If it doesn't work again, we'll move on quickly. But we'll give us a shot. I think it provides some good perspective and a little bit of a comedic perspective, if you will, as well, before we get into the topic at hand tonight. So give this one shot, and then we'll go into neighborhood standards.
Wake up! Wake up, wake up, wake up! Up you wake, up you wake, up you wake, up you wake! Look, new neighbors. I'm Teddy.
Wow, we're neighbors. Nice.
All right. Now. Well, man, if you guys ever need anything or we get too noisy, just talk to me or talk to Pete.
Hi, we're hosting a little birthday party.
That's your party? You guys would throw that?
A little bit of party-related noise.
Make sure if we're too noisy, call me first. Don't call the cops. Okay. Are you ready for
It's time to shut it down.
You can't be serious. This is a great party.
Either shut it down or I'm calling the cops.
Get your hands behind your head.
You called about your neighbor? No.
When you called the cops, you violated the circle of trust, stalker.
We're sorry. We called the cops, okay?
You have no idea what you started.
I'm telling you, these people are Satanists. As I sit here, they are Satanists. Neighbor, take a warning.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
It's a frat broke into the car and stole all the airbags.
So weird.
Why would they just break into an airbag?
I don't know. We should follow police.
darkness inside of me, and you will see it. Sorry, my ball just got in your face.
Want neighbors like those? Most people don't. In fact, we asked kids at Norview Community Center what they like about their neighborhood. They said things like, it's fun and don't have any trouble. It's fun, safe, and clean. Peace and quiet. To keep it safe and clean. They have a corner store and they have almost cookouts every day. Having a lovable neighborhood isn't rocket science, but it does take neighbors working together to attract other good neighbors. Housing is usually an individual or family's biggest financial investment, whether it's a mortgage or rent. So smart shoppers are looking for the best investment that they can afford. This creates a very competitive market for good neighbors. Every neighborhood is competing for good neighbors. Look at what realtors advise prospective buyers and tenants. They say it is important to visit a prospective neighborhood at various times of the day, both weekdays and weekends, to get a feel for what it would be like to live there. Look at how the homes are maintained to see if they meet your standards. Try and talk to residents about what the community is like. Likewise, these are some of HGTV's recommendations for choosing a neighborhood. They say, remember your first impression. Observe the neighborhood at different times of the day. Look for warning signs. Stop and listen. And talk to neighbors. Every neighborhood has an invisible resume which will attract or turn away good neighbors. What do these homes say to prospective buyers or renters? Are homes and yards attractive? Do they show neighborhood pride? Part 2 will later cover basic city and state codes. But calling your neighbor in for enforcement shouldn't be the starting point. It often leads to feuding neighbors, which makes everyone, including city staff, unhappy and uncomfortable. Today's segment and discussion is more about how to create neighborhood standards and bring residents along while creating as few enemies as possible. Today's segment will go into greater detail, but here's a few summary ideas on how to set neighborhood standards peacefully in your neighborhood. One of which is to draw attention to neighborhood strengths and positives, and not just weaknesses. This is often done through using awards such as Yard of the Month, Christmas Lights, or Business of the Year. Another idea is to give residents a chance to be part of the vision process by including them in setting neighborhood standards. Of course, one of the most important is always set a positive example. Another idea is to provide new neighbors with welcome packets that include standards and to discuss neighborhood pride. Another way is to educate, using newsletters, workshops, and other ideas. Another suggestion is to host neighborhood get-togethers to build positive relationships and to learn from each other. And lastly, build a partnership with government and other officials to resolve neighborhood problems.
All right, I'm glad we got the video to work that time. So we'll hop back into our presentation. Here we go. Okay. Let's see what we do. So first, what we'll do the rest of the night is discuss neighborhood standards, and what we hope to do is to provide you and your neighbors and civic leagues with resources and strategies for both establishing and promoting neighborhood standards and also improving curb appeal by working together with your neighbors and with your civic league. So we do this, and we recommend this process by starting this process by asking yourself a series of questions and discussing either individually or with your neighborhood these 6 questions. So the first question we recommend asking yourself is, what can I learn about my neighborhood? So here are a series of resources that the city or other organizations have available to you that you can learn a whole host of information about your neighborhood, including demographic information or codes information or service request information that we think is really, really helpful in identifying what is happening in your neighborhood and putting a little bit of data and research to what you may or may not see in your neighborhood and what you may experience in your neighborhood. So I'd hope to show a few examples just to show you guys what some of these look like. So Norfolk Air here is a hopefully a system you guys most of you are familiar with, but it's the city's property information database. So here you could go and type in the address of any address in the city of Norfolk and find all the publicly available property information about it. This also helps with identifying, what Civic League area a place is in or how many code violations a place has been cited for. And so that's information that might be helpful in identifying, what's going on in your neighborhood that you do or do not always see. Another good resource is, of course, My Norfolk, which Halima did a great presentation and quick briefing on. So I just wanted to show you guys what it looked like so everyone's familiar. But you guys, have the ability to create service requests here. And then, of course, you can find all sorts of articles and information about types of service requests and what you should report and how you should report it and those sorts of things. Another bit of information that's helpful is our open data portal. So this is a portal that the city has established that shares all of our publicly available information that we've put into data sets. So you can use this for a whole host of information. Almost everything the city collects, if we collect it and we advertise it and we publish it, it's here. So you can find all this information by coming down here and viewing either the stories or the catalog, and you can, I'll show you this really quickly. You can find all of the sort of categories over here on the left side of the screen that you might be interested in your neighborhood. And then finally, one other that I wanted to highlight tonight is our resource that we have here in Neighborhood Engagement and Neighborhood Development, which is our NBN library, our Neighbors Building Neighborhoods library of information. And we just collect a whole host of resources and tools that might be helpful for you guys in establishing and discussing neighborhood standards with your neighbors. So we have a bunch of resources here, including a section dedicated entirely to neighborhood standards that you'll find about halfway down the page. So here you see sort of brochures and examples that other neighborhoods have put out that we think were particularly helpful and useful in establishing neighborhood standards and having that conversation with your neighbors. So those are just a few examples that we wanted to highlight tonight of these resources that are available to you in terms of establishing and promoting neighborhood standards in your neighborhood.
All right, question number 2 that you can ask your neighborhood is, what is the market doing in your neighborhood? You can ask a real estate agent, or you could look at Zillow and Trulia. And what can this information show you for your neighborhood? It can tell you if people are investing in their properties. Are property values going up, or are property values going down? How long are houses on the market for? It can just give you a plethora of information about the neighborhood and how the neighborhood is moving forward. And again, that investment, who's investing in the property? Are people staying in the neighborhood, or are they leaving? Are there 20 houses on the market in your neighborhood, or are there 2? So I know one of my neighborhoods, Talbot Park, actually has a real estate agent that is part of their Civic League meeting, and she actually does a real estate report during the meeting just to kind of show where the market's at, where it's going, and how it's useful to the neighborhood. So that's kind of, what is the market doing? Why is it important? And next slide, Del.
Yeah, perfect. So a third question, and a really important question that we like to focus on, is called, what is the middle 1/3 of my neighborhood doing? So as you'll see here on the graph, it sort of highlights that each neighborhood sort of has sections or thirds of the neighborhoods that fall into one of these 3 categories. So on the farthest end of the spectrum, you have sort of the healthiest properties, if you will, and sort of properties that don't need much nudging from neighbors or code enforcement or city staff that take are proactive in managing their curb appeal and really go above and beyond the minimum standard of our code enforcement to promote their curb appeal and to really tend to their property above and beyond the minimum standard. On the other end of the spectrum, you have properties that might fall into a less healthy category and might need a little bit more nudging and encouragement and work with our code enforcement team or zoning enforcement team or other city staff and city departments, and also need a little bit more nudging from neighbors and community members to help them move the property along and just to tend to the property for whatever reason their circumstances are. So where we like to focus with neighborhood standards, though, is sort of in the middle 1/3 of your neighborhood, in which they're not quite falling in the least healthy category, but not quite in the healthiest category, and sort of are hanging around the minimum standard of a neighborhood of code enforcement, for example. So we think that influencing the middle 1/3 of the neighborhood is where civic leagues and neighbors really have the most impact and really move along the most properties by working with them to promote and encourage them to improve the curb appeal and to move along on the neighborhood standards. And so a couple of ways that we recommend, doing that is first and foremost relationship building. So getting to know that neighbor or that property owner, whoever it may be, and having a relationship with them rather than just, calling code enforcement on them, for example, or only talking to them when there's an issue, but rather having an ongoing relationship with them so that when it is time and there is an issue or there is, something where you might say, hey, we're all participating in this yard of the month thing. How about you join us? Now you have a relationship already pre-established with them. That sort of dovetails really well with communication, engaging with them, outside of just promoting their property maintenance, but engaging with them in other ways and inviting them to the community activities and inviting them to the civic league meetings or just being neighborly and just a neighborly conversation with them on your walk or as you're leaving the house in the morning. Those sort of just informal and formal communications is a really good way to influence and sort of work with this middle 1/3 of your neighbors. Recognition is a really important tool that neighbors and civic leagues in particular and sort of going out of your way to recognize when you see someone and sort of who may or may not have always taken care of their property or gone above the minimum standard, but then when you see them, planting a flower bed or curbing, taking care of the curb on their grass, those sort of things is really, it can be a neighborly compliment, or it can go as far as recognizing them as the yard of the month, for example, and really making a big pat on the back about taking that step to go above the minimum standard. It really goes a long way in engaging that resident in that property. And finally, this is the visioning and neighborhood standards, guys. So this is really where we think that this topic tonight is really most impactful. And once you have established a neighborhood standard and formalize that into a brochure or a welcome pack or whatever it may be, really engaging with this middle 1/3 to say, here's the minimum standard, and we appreciate you for following that. But here's where we think our neighborhood standards are, and here's what we are all going to partake in to improve our neighborhood standards and to improve the curb appeal and go above and beyond the minimum standards. So we have a couple of examples as well that we've found, seen across the city that we think have been helpful in other neighborhoods. And so one is an example from a door hanger that Old Huntersville created that highlights their community standards right there in bullet points for neighbors. And so they'll canvass the neighborhood and provide these as a door hanger for everyone. But just a quick reminder, you can hang it on the fridge, you can keep it right there by the lawnmower, for example, and just reminds you of what your standards are and how we're all committed to the same thing together. And similarly, Fairmont Park offers a welcome brochure to new neighbors. So a new resident, new tenant, or new property owner moves in, they offer this welcome pack to say, here's who we are as the Fairmont Park Civic League. Here are some of the responsibilities that we take on as a community together. And here's some resources that a new resident may not have, but definitely needs. So that's another good example of things that a neighborhood can come together and do, and it's a good way to welcome and engage that new resident. Just a couple more resources for you guys. So you heard Sherry Johnson from Neighborhood Quality speak earlier. So they have a whole host of resources available on their website, which is, you can see the top of the screen. But if you're calling in, it's norfolk.gov/neighborhood quality. Similarly, like I showed you a few minutes ago, we have a whole host of information and resources available as well, which you can find on our website at norfolk.gov/NBN Academy. And both of those will highlight in depth, a lot of neighborhood standards. So if you're looking for these examples, particularly the other ones that other civic leagues or other neighborhoods have put out, they're all available here in our resource library. And finally, one thing that I didn't get to when I was on the page is we created a video with the Department of Planning on working with developers. And so this is really important in terms of once you've established a neighborhood standard and once you're trying to promote the curb appeal in your neighborhood, really important that you engage with these either private property owners or commercial developers who are coming in and trying to develop, a new lot or whatever it is, to say, here are the standards the minimum standards that the city has, here are the neighborhood standards that we have. So when you're talking about how you're going to develop it and what your facade is going to look like and how you're going to maintain your property, these are the sort of things we want to discuss with you. And so that video on working with developers is really, really helpful in terms of how you can engage as a neighbor or as a civic league in particular with developers in this conversation.
All right, here's the next question, number 4. What are my neighborhood strengths, assets, and networks, and are we using them? So, and then at the bottom, as you can see, you want to identify and focus on your strengths, target resources, build genuine partnerships, and connect work to neighborhood confidence building. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that our department and our neighborhood engagement team can do for you in respect to this. We provide a training on asset mapping so you can find those strengths in your neighborhoods and work on using them in your neighborhood to better your neighborhood. So we are available to do that training anytime. So all you got to do is get in touch with your neighborhood development specialist, and we can do that. Within that training, we do an exercise called hand, heart, head. Sorry, I couldn't think of the third H, but we do that activity. And if you haven't done it with us before, it's a really good exercise just to do with your civic league anyway. With that, you talk about what you have, what you can do for the neighborhood. What can you use your hands for? What are you passionate about? And what do you have the heart to do? And so a lot of the times you can connect with people by just having some similarities. Say that I like cooking and Sherry likes cooking. We can connect that way, and we can provide some services. Like I said, with the real estate agent that is in Talbot Park, we are using her strengths in the neighborhood to do something. So anytime you guys want to do those exercises in your neighborhood at a civic league level or whatever, we are available to do that. Also, when we're looking at strengths in the neighborhood, one of the best books that I've read is For the Love of Cities by Peter Kajima. And he talks about finding people in your city or your neighborhood that have a passion for it, that really love their city, because those are the people that are going to help you do things. Those are the people that are going to be willing to help on a Saturday or volunteer or do something with you or make the website. So if they're passionate about something, they're going to want to use that to help do anything in the neighborhood. They're probably willing to just get out there and help. So when we're building genuine relationships, when we're talking about that, we're not just going out and seeing if somebody can donate to our project that we're doing, but we're going out and just talking to those neighborhood businesses. Go to your local 7-Eleven, find out who the manager is, and see if you can make a connection with them before even needing them. So when you do need them for an event, they might be willing to donate Cokes or waters or whatever. So build on those relationships and connect and build confidence in your community. So those are just some ways that we can help you guys with building strengths. And then we have some examples, I think, next up. And this is just showing some neighborhood pride and things that you can do to encourage people. So the Yard of the Month program is good because when you think about it, if somebody they're willing to do more work to get their yard to be Yard of the Month. So if you do something like that, that can build on your strengths in the neighborhood. If you really have somebody that has a great lawn and landscaping, it might encourage others to do the same. And then as well, having a newsletter highlighting all the great things that are happening in your neighborhood also helps. And even things like kids having a lemonade stand, promote that and promote that in your newsletter and social media and whatever things that you're using to show those strengths and assets.
Yeah, perfect. And one more question we consider asking is, what is my neighborhood brand? So there are a couple questions that go with that to consider when trying to identify and wrap your mind around what your neighborhood brand is first and foremost, how do outsiders and insiders perceive it? So what is the common understanding, common thought about our neighborhood? Both the people that live here and to the people that just drive through it or don't know anything about it. Another quick question is, and sort of two that pair together, is what verbal messages does your neighborhood give about itself? So what are the things that we're saying about our neighborhood on our own? What are the things that we're putting out, that our neighborhood is putting in about it, that we're verbalizing about our neighborhood to present a message and a narrative about our neighborhood? And similarly, what are the nonverbal messages that your neighborhood says about itself? So if someone drives through there or sees, the park in the neighborhood, or sees, it just drives along the streets, what are those nonverbal messages that people pick up that we aren't exactly verbalizing and we're not saying, but that people are understanding about our neighborhood without anybody saying it or without anybody telling them about it? And then finally, what web presence does it have? So sort of dovetails with, how are we verbalizing, but sort of what web presence do we have in terms of we're talking about our neighborhood and we're communicating out to outsiders about our neighborhood. So we are on, social media, or we're leveraging, local media outlets or whatever it may be to sort of provide a presence about our neighborhood, provide that web presence so that people can identify and understand our neighborhood through the lens that we see it and how we understand it as the residents that live there every day. So thinking about, what is your neighborhood's brand is really important in terms of, discerning where you want your neighborhood standards to be and what you feel like might help with solidifying that neighborhood brand or improving that neighborhood brand or whatever it may be that you guys determine and identify with your neighborhood.
And the last question is probably the most important question you want to ask. Do people have an emotional attachment to your neighborhood? Is there creativity? Is there beauty? Are we welcoming? Some examples of things that communities provide that kind of show pride that I've seen. And you can see some pictures down at the bottom, but Inglefest, any community that has a big festival, Berkeley Reunion, there is Elizabeth Park has stickers that they place on their cars. So if a car breaks down next to the neighborhood, they actually know that that person is a neighbor and they can stop and help them. And so it's a little sticker of Queen Elizabeth. But just little things like that show pride. And I'm going to show you guys one from my neighborhood. But we actually have flags that say Woodbine, a great place to live. And so just little things like that can help show investment and pride in your neighborhood. And I think one of the things with during COVID that we saw is a lot of neighborhoods took pride in their community by showing little things, doing little things. I saw a wishing tree, a rock garden that kids painted a bunch of rocks. We saw food distributions on the south side that they provided a lot of food to a lot of people. Just little things, obstacle courses, chalk obstacle courses in communities. Any little thing like that shows pride and makes people want to be part of that neighborhood. And that's what you're really trying to do is in this case is once people are doing stuff, other people will follow. So that's the most important one. You really want to get people emotionally invested. So that is all the questions that we like to ask for neighborhood standards. Does anybody have any questions to put in the chat if they want to, or raise their hand? And again, we just like to promote our website with these things. So if you want more information about our whole department, so any of the information that we've discussed tonight from Sherry and Halima to Delk and I, please go to www.norfolk.gov/neighborhoods, and it has our whole department's information on there. Lots of good information, so please visit that. But are there any questions in the chat, Delk? Or do you want me to look?
Yeah, no, not that I'm seeing right now, but yeah, please. I know we're a little bit over the time, and I definitely apologize about that. But yeah, if anybody has any questions for Jamie and I about neighborhood standards, please feel free to use the chat or raise your hand, and we can take a few here. But certainly also available if you guys want to visit our website. All of our contact information is there as well, and we can certainly provide that after as a follow-up, the presentation, the resources as a follow-up as well. So if you have any questions, certainly can reach us.
And Jim, if you want to put up the evaluation, I think Delk, you might have to close out. There you go. And so if you guys just take a minute to fill out the evaluation, we would really appreciate that. And we just want to thank you guys for coming and spending the evening with us. And hopefully you learned something. But if you have any questions, please get in touch with any of us, your neighborhood development specialist, Sherry, Halima, we're all available to you. Dope, did I miss anything?
Nope, I think that's it. Yes. So before you head out, if you don't mind filling out our evaluation, just to let us know what you thought of the course and if there's anything we can improve or anything else, any other questions you have, you'll see the poll here now on the right side of your screen if you're on a computer or a tablet. So yeah, please, if you don't mind filling out the evaluation for us before you head out. But otherwise, thank you all for attending. I really hope this was valuable information. We will have follow-up resources for anybody after the meeting as well. So thank you guys very much.
Thanks, everybody. Call me. Text me.
Great training, everybody. Thanks for seeing everyone. Have a good night. Sherry, does that mean I get to call you too? I get to call Sherry? Yeah, I will. And Halima.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good evening.
Yeah. I got away with the whole presentation, my daughter not coming in because I locked the door, but now she's knocking on the door.
She's allowed in now. That's
Yeah.
Okay, what was the author's name of the book, Jamie? I got the title, but not the author.
It's Peter, and the last name, and I'm going to spell it for you because it's Kageywama. And I did look it up on Google so I can say it right. But
okay,
you can find it on Amazon or in any bookstore. But it is a great light read, and it really gets you excited about your city and hopefully doing things in your city. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Great job. I was in the car and had to get in the house. And so that's why I was like, I told you I'd introduce myself later.
I got you.
Oh, no
well, we
problem.
appreciate you, Miss Christopher.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Bye now. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Yeah,
You too.
Bye now.
Kevin, I'll be out in a minute, baby.
I think I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting now. I think everybody's pretty much answered the poll.
Yeah.
So
sounds good. Thanks,
yeah,
Deb.
thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot, Jamie. Thanks a lot, Jim, and to Miss Worley.